I think we are live. We had some technical difficulties, but I am so glad to be with y'all. I am Krista Wilson. I am the founder and CEO of Wilson and Associates Coaching and Consulting, and this is our second YouTube live to share some training, some insights, some tools and resources with you. I hope that you are able to find a resource and some insights that can help you as you navigate workplace and team conflict and tension and challenges. So let's dig right into it. So let me tell you first, I actually did a poll of our email list on social media, and I started to ask questions about how is conflict showing up on their team and in their workplace, because we wanted to make sure that the resources and the information that I provided connect with what people are really experiencing. And so for this YouTube live, the content that I decided to share, pretty excited about it. It's actually about this concept about difficult people. Have you ever been in a workplace and you've said, oh, they're so difficult, or why we have this tension is because of that person? What I wanted to unpack in this episode is, what if it wasn't about that person being difficult? What if there was something else at play? So we're going to dig into this topic, which is why we got to maybe ease up on calling people difficult, and how we can start to name the real challenges that might be sparked on your team. So a couple of things that I will share. You are in the right place if you are trying to figure out how you can deal with tension. Maybe you're seeing disengagement on your team. Maybe there's tough conversations that you don't know how to start or how to finish. In this 4-part YouTube series that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be digging right into that. So glad to see folks. Welcome here. Feel free to comment on the page, and I'll see that and be able to reply. And with that, just know that you are in the right place. Let me tell you just for a second about why I care so much about conflict. It is because it's expensive. It costs people. And I don't always want to just talk about what it costs a company, but it does cost companies on average about almost close to 400 billion, right? 360 billion a year. But the costs are also personal. Have you ever had a workplace disagreement, some tension? Maybe someone said something to you that was disrespectful, and you felt that maybe you were being silenced or not supported. There's been some studies that have shown that it takes about 40 minutes for you to recover, because you're processing. What do I say? Do I address it with them? Do I tell my manager? It is a challenge. And so it's both the financial cost of lost productivity. It's the cost of stress, because we don't know how to handle and manage stress. And folks say they want training, but it's not available to them. So I want to get into it because I care deeply about, can we just go to work and not experience the stress and strain, the tension that comes from disrespect and disharmony? So I'm excited to share with you for this episode and dig into it. Shout out to Marcello. I hope I'm saying it right, from Atlanta. I grew up in Atlanta. I just got back from Atlanta. So I'm glad to see you on YouTube from Atlanta. So here's a question for you. What if, when we say that we're having this tension or we're having this disagreement or conflict, what if, when we try to point the finger at the other person by saying, oh, they're difficult, what if that's us being a little lazy? I know that's harsh. I know that's harsh. You might feel like, why is she calling me names? We're only 5 minutes into the session. But I say that because it is true. There is something called a high conflict personality, a HCP. And these are folks who fan the flames of conflict. They're the folks who instigate. Maybe they're the ones who are, cutting you off in a meeting and they've been disrespectful to you. That is a real thing. And I have found in my 17 years of consulting in my firm, Wilson and Associates, that sometimes when we label people as the one who's difficult, it's almost a lazy cop-out. We see people being animated. Maybe what they said landed as harsh, but maybe it was an opportunity for accountability, right? So what we invite our clients to do is, as opposed to labeling folks that you're difficult, they're hard to work with, they don't collaborate. Perhaps if we expanded the view, there might be an opportunity to look at what are some of the real problems that are emerging on our team, besides the label that's very easy to give. So I'll give a prime example. Years ago, I worked on a team, and it was a super diverse team, multi-language, multi-cultures, people from different parts of California. And we had a participant, let's call him Dave to protect the innocent or the guilty. Dave was one of those folks who raised a lot of questions. They had a little bit of distrust about folks in leadership and really about government policies and systems because in their past, they have been harmed and disrespected by those who represent institutions like government, children, family services, that kind of stuff. Whenever this person would speak, you would see people recoil, like, oh, here they go again. Oh, they always are so argumentative. The tone that that guy speaks from, it's always so harsh. And it got to a place where people just stopped listening to this guy altogether because they just felt like he was a rabble rouser or someone who's always trying to, and I quote, cause trouble, because that was in our feedback forms. And it started to rub off on me too as a facilitator. I got to tell the truth. I thought, wow, this guy really is trying to agitate the group. But when I said, I don't want to label him like that, is there any warrant or truth or insights to what he's sharing? And so I started to map out the things that he was raising. And sure enough, while he used a firm tone, he wasn't yelling at anybody. And while he maybe was offering feedback that was constructive to point out where the institution maybe was moving in a way that was harmful, there was some truth to what he offered. And surveys of community groups backed up that the sentiments that he was raising showed that there was a bigger structural issue at play. There was a lack of trust between the governing institutions and grassroots community folks. And so if we would have discounted this guy because of his tone or because of what he said or how he said it or the words he chose, we would have missed an opportunity to see that we cannot move forward with the policy building effort if we did not address this lack of trust. So this is what I'm trying to get at. When we label folks as difficult, when they might be trying to offer opportunities for accountability or for deeper understanding, if we write them off because they're difficult, that's what I meant when I said that's us being a little lazy, because we're not doing the work to get under the surface to see what actually is fueling this person that might be landing as difficult. Now, I will also say this. Did the person speak and sometimes point a finger when they were trying to make the point? Yes, that did happen. Were there times where this person also was disrespectful or rude? Yes, that's also true. But what we invite our clients to do is separate the situation from the person. Okay? Let's look at what's being said and what's being offered, and then we can almost map that. So some of what he offered was constructive feedback, holding the group accountable to the vision. And then some of what he offered was in the realm of disrespect. And so we can manage both of those. When it's disrespect, we can offer back the team's conflict norms, the agreements of what is acceptable behavior or not. And then when it's just accountability and strategy and contrarian ideas, we can nest that over here and then have a discussion about those ideas. But it's so important to separate what we experience from a personality flaw versus what might be a structural or systemic thing. So I've told you a little bit about what the theme for this session is, but let me actually tell you who I am. I'm Christy Wilson. I am the founder and CEO of Wilson and Associates Coaching and Consulting, and I have been running this firm since 2008. And what we do is when leaders are just done with dysfunction, or they're navigating change and uncertainty, or they need help with conflict or their culture, they hire my firm to help them build the strategies to move forward and to create environments and workplaces where their people thrive. So that's my background. Let me tell you this. If you stay to the end of today's session, you will get a free code for this course. Now, one of the things I always talk about is when we look at conflict, there are personality conflicts, but sometimes those conflicts are due to the challenges that we're experiencing related to cross-cultural communication. And so for my team, we built a little e-course to help you understand Where might there be opportunities for me to be a more inclusive leader, for me to understand the differences of the way that people see things and communicate? And so when you say it again, and even if you're watching it on replay, we'll keep this code active for the next week, and you'll have access to Dismantle the Zones, our e-learning program. So here's what we're covering today. I'm going to be talking about a little bit more deeply about why difficult might be a leadership cop-out. I will be sharing something that I call, and I was trained on this, the circles of conflict. Because when you can start to understand why people are experiencing conflict or disrespect, we can map the source of it. It helps us create a strategy and a plan to get to the other side. I'll also be talking about what are the issues. Are they structural? Are they personality problems? And then I'll talk a little bit at the end of that. How do we shift from pointing the finger and blaming folks to getting to a breakthrough, right? So I'm excited. I love this stuff. Let's dig right in. So I shared this with the story earlier that it's very easy for us to call someone difficult. But when we start to do that, it stops the conversation. And I don't mean it stops you just from the talking. I mean, even mentally, when we start to label folks as difficult, we will almost shut ourselves down from wanting to engage in a conversation with that person. So the first thing that I'm inviting you to do is that even in your gut, if something comes up for you and you were to say, gosh, this person is so difficult, what if you reframed that? And instead you were to offer yourself and others, what might be the kernel of truth that this person's trying to offer that can help me or help us do this work different, more effectively, or more in line with our vision and values and goals. So it's just expanding the view and getting curious. At my company, we have a framework that helps leaders begin to map and navigate conflict. And it's called the Scale Generative Conflict Method. And SCALE is an acronym. So the C in SCALE, the second step, is about getting curious. It's about suspending judgment. And I want to affirm that that's so hard because we all have our own stuff going on. But I will tell you that there's a lot of magic in getting curious, suspending judgment, having an open mind of possibilities, and that there could be a kernel of possibility that we are wrong about this person, that they're not difficult, but maybe they're helping to raise difficult issues and topics. When we label someone as difficult, when we already put in our mind of that they are useful or not, good or not, it does block our curiosity. It blocks our opportunity to dig deeper, to do inquiry. And curiosity and inquiry are needed to get to a solution. So that's why we are always about, suspending judgment and getting curious. That's the S. And then with the C, it's getting curious so that you can have these courageous conversations. So let's think about this second point. This is something that I really love. We call it the circles of conflict. And essentially, when you think about being in a disagreement, or you think about disrespect, or you think about just the not feeling good that can happen in a team, there's a spark that caused the conflict. There's a spark that caused that team tension. Oftentimes, we look at the person who initiated the spark, who named the spark, and we look to them as why the meeting got derailed, or why we're now off topic and we're not moving toward the goal that we started out in the meeting. It's easy to point to that person as the blame. But if we look at what the person might be saying or demonstrating or uplifting, we might find that the source of the conflict, the source of the tension, connects to one of these areas, which I call these drivers of the conflict. So one source of conflict is data conflict. So sometimes we have different information, right? We have different information, and that causes misunderstanding or miscommunication. And the next thing you know, you're in a tension. You're in a moment of friction that you may not know how to get out of. So instead of pointing to the person, again, we invite folks to move back and to ask, is the source of this conflict that we don't all have the same information? Second, one of these circles of conflict, we call it structural conflict. So sometimes there's a structural conflict that is baked into how things are designed or how things are set up, how departments are designed to work collaboratively with one another, or maybe how they're designed and been structured to almost be at opposites, to be in opposition. So we invite our clients when we do a conflict mapping process, we start to look at, is there something here structurally that makes it very difficult that is sparking a conflict? So I invite you to think about that. How is the way that your meetings, your team's agreements, if you have them, the way that your workflows are set up, how might that be contributing to conflict? Okay. A third activator of conflict is relationships. So, one of my things is I've worked in all kinds of sectors, but my background is nonprofits. One of the things nonprofits, in my experience, often will talk about is that we are a family. And that never quite set right to me. And maybe it's because I have a high conflict family. We're all working on it, but that is a label that I would provide. And so when you talk about that your organization is a family, think about what dynamics come with that, right? There's different people, there's different personality types, and different interests. Now, that's just your family. And it might have some differences, diversity in the family, but y'all have a lot more in common because you're related or you're connected by choice if you're a chosen family. In a workplace, we have those dynamics, and then it's 10x. We have people from different cities, different regions, different countries. They were raised in different cultures that taught them how to communicate, how to listen, how to be present, whether or not it's appropriate to argue your point. I don't mean argument in like a nasty way, but to be assertive, I should say. And you have all of this difference in one workplace environment, and everybody is coming into the job with their own personal operating system, right? A personal operating system is how you see the world, how you make choices, how you interact with others, how you collaborate, what your communication style and preferences are. Do you prefer conversations face to face, or do you prefer email? Do you need a 3-day lead time before engaging in something challenging, a conversation that might be challenging, or can you do it on the spot? Times however many employees, right, are in your organization. So the client I'm talking to right now, they've got 25,000 employees, and thousands of them interact on various days and various projects. I say that to say that there's the opportunity for there to be relationship clashes. That's just bound to happen. There are going to be conflicts purely because, as one of our clients said, I don't like her. I do not like her. I will never like her. We will never be friends. And yet, they are going to be coworkers. And so, what we invite folks to do when they see this kind of conflict bubbling is we invite our clients to think about this. What is something that is good? What is something that I respect about this person? Now, I asked the client this last week, and she said, "Oh, Krista, you are making me have to dig deep on this one." But I'll tell you, even her, to her alleged chosen enemy, she was able to identify something really good, which was this. She really does what she says she will do, and you can count on her to deliver what she said she'll do. And reliability is a huge part of being in a collaborative, low conflict team. So, again, if you're in a conflict and relationships seem to be at the source of it, just a personality clash, that too can be worked through. But the first step is mapping it. Are we in a tension or a friction or a conflict because we have misinformation, or is it our personalities are clashing? So here's another one, and this one is trickier. It's called the values trigger or area of conflict. Now, I'll tell you this. In 2025, we in the United States are super polarized. You can just look at any elected board, whether that be your city commission, or even looking at the United States Congress or the House. And you can see the way that there's just people believe different things. And when we believe different things, we value different things. we think different things are more important than others, and that differs from someone else, there's bound to be a conflict. Now, what we see on the national stage is that when there's a values clash or a values conflict, it devolves into utter disrespect, unkindness, rudeness, a lack of empathy, because what happens is we begin to see it as a high conflict. A high conflict is where, in that situation, it's escalated to an us versus them. But I would assert, and this is the conflict trigger that's harder to work through. But it's this idea to me, how do I not see someone as my enemy? Even though we might have totally different values. I've worked on projects where someone flat out told me, I think you're okay, Krista, but I don't deal with Black people. I value Black people. I also value all people. So that is an example of a values clash purely, where someone made a comment, they said things that were a total opposite of my own value. And so that's when I say that the work is to still see them as a human being and still try to be in an environment with them where I don't perpetuate dehumanization of them. Now, this is the work. We at my company help teams build the skills, the strategies, and the processes to even navigate these hardest of values. But that's an extreme one. Here's a more common everyday workplace values clash. Should you stay at work until the job is done? Or if your day ends at 5, do you wrap up your work at 5 and pick it back up tomorrow? That's a values clash. For some people, and I'm a reform workaholic, I will just work until it's done. But I have had colleagues who would say, well, I need to be done at 5. I've got childcare pickup, I've got to prepare dinner, I've got elder care. Like, I just cannot stay till 5. And so then there'd be questions about, well, who's a better worker? Who's more committed to the team? And the answer is both people are committed. They just have different values, right? And so those values are going to shift their priorities. So it's important to name what those values are, as opposed to doing what we often do, which is character assassinations. And then the last area where we see conflict, and this is also a challenge to navigate, but it can be done, is conflicts where there is a clash around identity. So I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know how to engage with you. I don't know your preferences. So there's an identities clash, or there might be some power dynamics. So perhaps there's a meeting. You are offering feedback, and then someone cuts you off before you were done. But that person happens to be in a position that is over yours in an organizational chart. You feel disrespected, cut off. You value being heard and seen, and that wasn't given to you. And it's been done by someone that has positional authority over you. That's a tense situation. And it's high stakes and possibly high emotion. But knowing that the clash is less about this person's evil, they're bad, they hate me, they hate other people, it's being able to map some of this conflict here is about communication, preferences. It's also about role, and it's also power. Now, another dynamic that I've often seen is when you have a power dynamic that also has a through line of systemic identity marginalization. So in other words, what I mean is, if you are in that same situation, you were speaking, a person in a higher position spoke over you, and it made it a tense situation. Now, what if you were, for example, neurodivergent, and that person's neurotypical, and the neurotypical person, which is has more structural privilege in an organization, doesn't understand the communication needs and differences of the person they're talking to. We also see this over racial lines, age lines, gender lines, etc., which is why we created that course, Dismantle the Zones, so that you can start to even learn what are the identities that are often suppressed, or are often in low-powered positions, or are often structurally marginalized. Every leader needs to be holding this map of identities so that when they're in the conflict, they can almost like a radar spot what's happening and give context to the things that might seem that it's just an issue of power and role, but there might be a subtext of bias underneath that. If you watch the video to the end, you will be able to get access to that code. I'm giving that course for free, 100% off. So you definitely want to stay to the end and get that code. It's available until July 31st. All right. So let me talk a little bit about this concept that I often see with our clients, which is this idea about personality problems. Because I'll be the first to say, that it does happen, that we do have those high conflict personalities. But I will also tell you that it's not always about the personality. And I think that's the thing I really want to underscore in this conversation, in this YouTube live, is that if we were to look at how people show up in the organization, yes, some of that can be attributed to that individual person and their personality. But a lot of it is also connected to the systems, the policies, and the culture of your organization. If you have an environment that is unsupportive, it facilitates overworking, it has led to burnout, then if somebody is asked to stay late or to do work that's above and beyond their job description, they're going to have a defensive reaction because they're tired, they're overworked, they don't feel valued, they don't feel seen. And so if that person were to become defensive, it would be very easy to label them as their personality problem, they're defensive. If you've got someone who has repeatedly in meetings over a long period of time try to share their ideas, try to innovate, and every time they step on the plank to offer their ideas, their innovations, and they're told things like, we've done that before, it'll never work, you're doing too much, we tried that before and it didn't work, and they constantly feel suppressed and be made smaller and smaller. And then in that one meeting, they say, wait a minute, I have something to say that matters. And maybe they speak up, maybe they don't have the coaching words that I just used, but the way that it lands is that they're defensive, they're a troublemaker, they aren't a collaborative team player. We label that person as defensive, right? We label that person as not a team player. We label that person as always the difficult one. But we are not looking at what were the systems in place over a long period of time that actually led that person to have the reaction that they had. This is what I want to uplift about how we look at the systems and the practices and the policies we have in place and how that contributes to why a person might be labeled as difficult. Because I'll tell you, when we do that, we can label somebody as abrasive, that abrasive colleague, but maybe they're not being abrasive or defensive or difficult or hard or competitive, all those labels. Maybe, just maybe, they are trying to survive a system that they see is broken, they deeply believe is broken, and they're trying so hard to be different and change it, but they're rebuffed every time. And you can only be rebuffed so many times before you have an internal reaction that might be a big nuclear reactor kind of reaction. On my team, in my organization, and even through our services, it's why we teach a method called pause and care, more acronyms, but they give you the step-by-step processes to manage your own emotions so that you don't have that reaction, but also help to bring others in to understand what reaction you're having. So here's a question I have for you. If you're watching this and maybe you're thinking to yourself, some of this rings true, here's my question for you. Have you ever worked with a difficult personality, right? Someone that you would label difficult. And if you have, was the conflict or the tension that emerged from that person's interaction on the team, was that solely theirs to own? Or were there other contributors, as in terms of people, or other contributing circumstances that led to that person being in a way that was labeled as difficult? Right? Is it the person or is it the systems? That's the question. So here's something I can offer you today as we think about how do we move forward from this reframe. It is to begin to shift the narrative. So what I often talk to my clients about is that perhaps the person's not being negative. So what if you flip the script in your own brain? Well, maybe they're not being negative. We haven't named the real issue. That's the opportunity to dig into the cause of the conflict, which of the circles of conflict or conflict activators got us here. Now, we help our clients build things like conflict norms. So, if attention or disrespect or rudeness or incivility shows up on your team, what's the playbook that everybody gets so that you're very clear? Here's how I should respond. Here's how our team has agreed that we will respond. Most companies have a code of conduct. They might have, things that warrant a disciplinary action, but very rarely do they have the preemptive conflict norms and also hierarchy of interventions. We build that for our clients. And starting, I believe, August 22nd, that is the date, we will be launching our next round of the conflict leadership accelerator. And in that 7-week program, you actually be able to draft conflict norms for your team with our templates and our frameworks. I would also say that if you're wanting support to, move from blame to breakthrough, think about what you might need in place, what framework or approach or, even script that you might offer people to help them name what's happening inside themselves or happening within the team. The point here is that we got to give structure to our teams and not have it be the wild, wild west where we assume that everybody has the skills and the techniques and the strategies to navigate through a conflict and to get to the other side in good relationship with their team. We are making too many assumptions about what people can and are able to do. And instead of assumptions, we should be offering them tools and tactics. One thing that I can offer you, this is just a free download too. It's called the Conflict Clarity Kit. You can scan that QR code. It's also in our YouTube bio about. And in this guide, you will be able to get some really amazing resources like a conflict checklist to see what's the state of conflict resiliency on your team. So if you want that free resource, go ahead and scan this QR code, or in the bio, you can find the Conflict Clarity Kit. Welcome to the person that just joined us. Good to see you here. And then the last thing that I'll share as we talk about this idea of not blaming difficult people, but instead looking at what's causing them to maybe show up in a way that looks difficult. What might be underneath the surface? I'll tell you, one of the things that are underneath the surface that we have seen over the last 17 years is that we are not great about having difficult conversations, particularly where there's high stakes, there's strong emotions or differing opinions. We are not great at those conversations. And if the person that we're in a conflict or a tension with is someone that has a different identity than us, we're even worse at it because we hesitate. There's also cultural communications. We don't always speak the same language. I don't mean that even the actual language, like English and Spanish. Maybe there's a regional dialect or cultural dialect that we don't understand. That's another source of conflict. So it's why for folks that have stayed to the end of this session, I want to actually offer you this free course. We are in a time as well in this country where terms like inclusion and navigating diversity is a little taboo sometimes. But I will tell you, even for clients of ours that have, in a way, publicly moved away from the work of equity and inclusion, when they are experiencing uncertainty and change and conflict on teams or throughout divisions or even in the whole organization, what they have found is that whether it's the leader in charge or someone who's leading and managing up, folks need skills to understand who are the identities that often are pushed to the margins, that are often silenced or ignored or not given the mic to share their ideas. When we can pay attention to how to build teams that are collaborative, where no matter what you look like or where you're from, what your zip code is, or where your grandparents came from, no matter any of that, you are seen, honored, and respected. We know that that leads to more collaborative teams, more innovation, higher productivity, efficiency, which for a nonprofit might be helping to do more with what you have. And for a for-profit agency, it looks like saving profits, making more money. So inclusion and deep listening and empathy are key skills. So I'm offering this course. It's called Dismantle the Zones for free. And what you can do is you can scan this code and go to the purchase site. And then you want to enter the code YT, YouTube, YT Live, LIVE number 2. Enter that code at checkout, YT Live 2, and you will get this course for free, and you'll have access to that course for 6 months. It won't take you 6 months to do it, but you'll get through it. You'll have access to it for 6 months. My team is making some updates and refinements, and that course will go live next week. But you can use this code at any time, and I would love for you to have that. So with that, that is the end of the YouTube Live. I am so glad to have shared these insights with y'all, because here's the thing. We are labeling folks as difficult when really it might be a leadership cop-out. We got to really understand what are the different triggers and activators of conflict, and that was a circle of conflict content that I offered, that sometimes we're quick to label things as personality problems, but really they are structural issues where we have a lack of structure or structures causing that conflict. And then I offered some ideas about how to move from blame to getting a breakthrough in terms of communication on your team. So that's it for this session. I will be back next week with another session talking about really this cost of conflict. If there are questions that you have, there's something that you want to offer, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Let me know your thoughts about difficult people at work, the sources of conflict, and what you want to hear on future sessions. I would love to hear it. So with that, y'all, that is it for YouTube Live number 2. And I will see y'all next week for YouTube Live number 3. Take care.